Hey everyone, Sycra here, and today I'm doing some more figure drawing, but this time I'm doing the male figure, whereas in my last video on figure drawing I had only females. Now the reason is because I was using Sketch Daily as a resource for poses, and I really dislike the Sketch Daily male poses. And if you're not sure why, well, just go to Sketch Daily and see the male poses and see. It's personal taste, I suppose. So I switched over to Pixel Lovely for this one because I got a lot of comments on from people who thought I should have included the male figure when doing a figure drawing demo, and that's very understandable. I get why that would be the case. So, okay, I'm doing the male figure, and the basic process is pretty much the same as the female figure, so I don't think you're going to be too surprised in what I'm doing because it's, as I said, like the female figure, except this time it's the males. So with the females, I was doing them in my style, and so I was adjusting proportions in some way. And with the males, it's no different. I just adjust the proportions in a different way. So I create more of a V taper in the body. So from the shoulders to the waist, I make the waist a bit smaller and the shoulders bigger, and I make the hips smaller as well, whereas with a female I make the shoulders smaller and the hips larger. And I guess everybody gets a thin waist because sure. And that's not to say that's all I draw. I draw people with different body types. It's just probably the most common one that I do is this, and it's something I've been sort of practicing because I found that when I have a fixed model to work from, I get faster at drawing that, I get more comfortable with it, and then when I do variation, I feel like I'm in control. Whereas if I don't really practice on one model first, and I don't really hone my skill on one thing, it's harder for me to do other things. I guess I'm missing the mastery component of it. And I don't know if this is making sense, because I'm talking about style, and style is one of these tricky things where some people would say, don't think about it at all, and for me, I think there's two sides to it. I think there's an inherent style, which we all have, just we're born with it, and that's like your handwriting, although you can change your handwriting too, but it's something more like a signature. It's just within you. And that's the way you hold the pencil, the shapes you're more inclined to. If you just let that happen, that's your inherent style. But then there's also a contrived style, which is something that you appreciate and you want to include in your work, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's entirely natural to you. And so for me, I really liked sharp things and pointy shapes. And what was probably inherent to me, though, was more well, at first it was stiff things. Can't wait to see the comments on that. But like, I wasn't very loose and flowy. But later I became very curvy and flowy and loose, and that did good. That was good because I could create more appealing shapes. It was easier. You get nice flowy lines. And here you'll see when I start with the gesture, the first stickman lines, the lines are very smooth and light, and those are the kinds of lines that are natural to me. But then I started practicing with the more pointy things, and it wasn't that I was necessarily good and suited to it in terms of just the mark making, but I liked how it looked, and so I practiced more until it became something that I was comfortable with, and now I'm a lot more comfortable with sharper shapes and lines. So anyway, I'm not drawing exactly what I see. That's the point I'm trying to make, and it's because I don't want to get into a copying mode where I look at the figure and I'm just like, okay, let me just copy what I see. That's something I did for a long time, and the problem is when you go into imagination stuff, it doesn't carry over. And anyway, I wanted to do stuff in my style, so what good does it do me to be flipping between, okay, I'm doing figure studies and I'm working in realism, and then I'm doing my own work and I'm working in a more stylized style. And so I feel like it's not a bad thing to do figure drawings and figure studies, but put it in whatever style you want to be, whether that's more cartoony or anime or things. Now, I have to put a disclaimer out and say that it is important to be able to do things realistically, because then you have a source material. It's like that phrase, learn the rules before you break them. There's a lot of people who don't learn the rules, and that's a problem. But there's maybe I wouldn't say even larger, because learning the rules is very hard and most people can't get through it. But there are a chunk of people who learn the rules, but then they forget the whole so you can break them part of it, and they become attached to the rules. And it's like, no, this is wrong. That arm's too long. And they forget that people have their own personality and style. So I think it's got to be both. You have to have learned the correct anatomy, and then you can play around with it. But anyway, so I'm getting to the point where it's actually getting harder and harder to do stuff out of my style, and this is something I wanted to get at, because I saw with a couple of my heroes are Joe Mad and J. Scott Campbell, and whenever I see their work, whatever they do, it's always in their style. And with Joe Mad, it's especially cool because everything he does looks, in my opinion, it looks really cool. So when he draws let's say he has a piece of paper or a cloth or a lamppost or something, like, it can be the most boring thing, but he makes it interesting. He adds like cool shapes and dynamic perspective, and it's just everything is awesome. And when he, draws it. So that's sort of what I started to see, is that the artists I admired didn't really get out of their style too much. And I used to think that it was a sign of skill to be able to jump around a lot and to do this style and then do that style and the other style. And I think, yeah, it is helpful as a teacher, but when you want to really refine yourself and polish your I would say skill, but it's not just skill, it's more technique. I don't know. But it's important to just be yourself and get really good at it. And whatever you do, you get good at, right? So if I jump around styles, I will get good at jumping around styles. But I'm not good with English lately. I will never be really good at any one of them. But if I only do my one style, I will get worse at doing every other style, but I'll get much better at doing that one style. And that's a trade-off that I decided I want to make. And so now I'm starting to get a bit worried about teaching things, like even this figure drawing thing, because everything it's gone through not just what I see, but then a style has been applied to it as well. And so I don't know, is that good, is that bad? I'm really not sure. But it's kind of what's gonna happen. So I start to feel like maybe the videos I do can be more of a guide of the journey, rather than just a teacher explaining like this is how to do something. It's more this is how someone wasn't very good at drawing and then slowly improved and experimented on different things and then found a style and then got better with the style, and this is what it looks like. But I still have a long way to go. So when I'm doing these figures, you'll notice that sometimes I really go far out. I'm losing all my English. What am I trying to say? I really deviate from the reference. That's what I'm trying to say. Man. See, if I was really professional, I would probably edit all this out and redo it. But no. We're going live. So yeah. So with this figure, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm looking at him and I'm getting ideas, but I'm not necessarily going to stick to things 100%. So I see that, for instance, he's wearing these clothes, and I thought, well, I want to practice anatomy, so I want to practice drawing what's underneath the clothing and see if I sort of can. And it's not like a showing off thing. It's about, by trying, it's testing yourself. Like, oh, okay, how well do I know this? What areas do I need to improve on? And I get that I still need a lot of work on certain areas. But it's not as hard as it used to be, so that's good. But yeah, I would recommend doing this as well, simply because you're forced to think more. And I think thinking and paying attention is so important, so vital and so neglected. Because when I draw, I've mentioned this before about juggling balls, right? And I don't mean with your hands in your pockets. But anyway, so there's balls like proportion and value and color and all these different things that you have to remember as an artist when you're creating a drawing. And in order to create a good drawing, you have to juggle more and more of these. And I realized that I was getting overwhelmed and I would forget things. Like I would focus on maybe keeping things in proportion, and then my gesture would suffer. Or I would try making things more pointy and like, hey, it's your sharp style. And usually, again, my gesture would suffer. Maybe my perspective, my form wasn't reading as well. Meaning it's not as good in a 3D space. It's more flat. And you don't want, unless you're going for a very paper, thin, flat style. Like there are styles like this, but for me, it wasn't the case. I still wanted my figures to look like they occupied space, that they could exist in a 3D world. And so it was hard to maintain all these things, but I learned that if you know you're missing something, simply by focusing on it a lot, it will help you to make sure you just get it more and more. So I noticed, for instance, yeah, my shapes were getting weaker. Sure, things were becoming sharp, but my overall shape was getting weaker. So what I started to do is really think about that. Like, okay, I'm drawing a guy. Okay, focus on the overall shape. Simplify it. Focus on simplification. What line am I going to make? Is this line going to help to create a cohesive shape, or is this line going to confuse things? And so having that in my head, and then it's really constantly asking questions. And so right now you're watching me drawing, and I'm drawing, each pose is 5 minutes, and I sped up the video by 2 times. So it's 2.5 minutes of screen time per pose. But it's this thing of, okay, I'm drawing, I don't know if it's fast or not. People could say it's slow, because I know in animation school, I was doing drawings faster than this because we had to do a lot of 30-second poses. And then when you do a lot of 30-second poses, then you move to a 1-minute pose, and it feels like 1 minute is a really long time. So then 5-minute poses are like, wow, I really have a lot of time. Whereas I don't think I've got that speed, but it's because of how many questions I'm asking myself, and I'm always asking questions. So, for instance, at any given time, okay, so like I'm drawing the hand. Well, what does the hand look like? What is the position of the hand? How do you convey that in 3 dimensions? Okay, put your style on top of it. How does this simplify into sharp things? What do you make sharp? What do you make rounded? Where do you push things? Okay, so here I decided, like, I'm gonna change his hair and make him a different character, because why not? If I make it a different character, then I get to focus more on the pose than on this model. And I think that's really important as well with figure drawing, is you don't just want to be drawing the model. I think that's one way of going about it, and those people who do that a lot, and I was definitely one of them, sort of end up with the final product as the finished work, right? Like, I'm drawing the model, here is the model, there, it's done. Whereas when you're converting it to your style, it's not about the product as much as it is you're forced to find out, are you good? Do you understand this or do you not? Because if you don't understand it, it's very hard to translate it. But if you do understand it, it'll come out okay. And it's, again, it's really difficult to be constantly asking yourself so many questions in your head while drawing. And so with this one, for instance, I really messed up on the lats, on the pecs, on how the hand going, the arm going behind his head is really, really wonky. But, you know, and even this, the way the serratus or serratus muscles, however you want to say it, come in, it's not exactly accurate. And so what I learned is that, okay, under pressure, it's very difficult to do this, and it's why I don't like a lot of the poses I find on figure drawing sites, but also even in traditional life drawing. You see a lot of people who, it's just the poses aren't something you see all the time, and so it's hard to apply what you learn. Like, okay, you might think, hey, I'm learning a lot, but are you really learning a lot? Like, can you draw something from imagination using what you've learned? And it can be difficult. So, I don't know. Life drawing is one of the things that it's like, I think it's good, but in some ways I feel like it's overrated. Because I spent many years learning anatomy, and I'm still learning anatomy, and I did a lot of life drawing, or I would say quite a bit of life drawing over the years. And a little over a year ago, I joined a gym and I started working out and stuff, and I was really bad because I was one of those artists who just sits on his butt all day and doesn't do any exercise. So I was terrible in terms of my physical health and strength and everything. But just working out consistently 3 or 4 times a week helped. And I would see a lot of people who are working out as well. But more than that, I would see muscles slowly appearing. And to see the development and like, oh, okay, so it's starting to appear here and it connects here. And I notice when I turn my hand, this muscle pops out. Like, seeing that for me was much more beneficial than all the anatomy study I had done about learning the names of the muscles. Like, sure, yeah, I can name the muscles, but anatomy is a little bit more like puzzle pieces. All the muscles fit in this very specific way, and when they flex, they do something, and when they extend, they do something. And so being in a gym and seeing that day in and day out, and especially the guys on steroids and stuff, although the muscles from people who use steroids tend to be a little more watery and they're flexed unnaturally all the time. So I think natural weightlifters or bodybuilders are probably better to look at. But anyway, my point is, I learned more from that than the anatomy books. So I don't know if it's just me. I don't know if it was just something that it's like specific to me. And also, I didn't really want to say it because I felt like, well, okay, so what if you don't have access to a gym? What if you're a girl and you don't want to build like all these muscles? Or a guy who doesn't want to build all these muscles? Then what? And I didn't have a good answer, so I thought, yeah, I'm not going to really mention this. But then I realized, like, just be honest. Just say whatever. Even if it works for you, it doesn't work for anyone else, fine. But maybe it'll work for somebody else. But I found that helped a lot. Seeing the muscles that way and also feeling the muscles. So it's the same thing I do with expressions. I always found expressions easy because whenever I would draw an expression like happy or sad or angry, and usually it was angry or sad because I wasn't too happy when I was younger, I would feel it in my face, and my face would sort of take on that expression. So then I don't need to look at a mirror. I just feel like what muscles are doing what, and then I just draw. Like, well, it feels like my eyebrows going down like this, and this muscle's getting tense and creased in the middle. And then you look at the mirror, and yeah, sure, you can look at the mirror to confirm, what's exactly happening. But you can go a long way just by the feeling, I think, or at least I could. So that's my thing, is be open to alternative methods of learning anatomy. And I think other things like drawing stuff in your own way, or maybe even drawing a model or looking at the model but then doing a different person but in the same model's pose. I think that can be helpful too, because again, it's like an exam where you're testing yourself. Do I really understand this, or do I only think I understand it? Do I get it, or can I only copy it? So, I don't know. Again, I'm not a great example because I feel like I'm still learning. So I have a long way to go. But anyway, moving on. So I hate this guy's poses because, again, they feel really unnatural. I don't see people in real life doing poses like this. But I guess maybe some people like poses like this, so because it seems like all the life drawing models do weird poses. The ones I've seen anyway, they tend to do very weird poses, and I've had a couple of models who will do poses that are cool and that look like, oh, I want to draw a figure doing that pose. But like a pose like this, it's very difficult for me to think of a time I would have a figure doing this pose. But I guess it's a way of showing the muscles. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. You can write what you think if you think there's something I'm missing about poses like this, or if you like poses like this, because I'm not afraid of being wrong and probably just don't understand something. But yeah. So you'll notice I'm very scribbly, especially in the beginning. It's more like you start light and then you define as you go. And that gives me the freedom to really change things. So if I don't like, or if I put the head in a wrong position, it's like, fine, it's okay, I can fix it. Now, with my paint, I don't know if it's just my version, but it started doing this thing where the eraser stopped working properly, and I couldn't really fix it, so I just stopped using the eraser entirely. And when I've been drawing traditionally, I've gone back to using pen. And what happened before is I was using pen a lot as well, and I noticed my figures were losing their gesture, and then I went back to pencil, and my gesture improved a lot. And then I would draw with pencil, and then I would ink with pen, and then I would erase. And it seemed okay, but now I've gone back to pen, and instead I'm just focusing on it a lot more, like pay attention to the gesture. Before I make the line, I have to think more, think about, well, what's this going to look like? Is this going to maintain a good gesture? Am I going to lose it? when I'm drawing this character, for instance, like, okay, so his face is sort of tilted up. How do I maintain? He's got like a pretty intense expression. How do I maintain that intense expression? So you see, I kind of went crazy with the eyebrows because that's like part of what I do, what I like to do, is exaggerate things. That's the caricature background. And then I did the beard thing because he's got a bit of a goatee, and it's like, well, it started to make him look weaker. And so I'm thinking, well, how do I strengthen this? Okay, maybe I can add some darker shadows. So there you go. In the eyes, I added a bit of a darker shadow. And maybe in the reference you could say he looks a bit more afraid, and in mine it's just more angry and intense. But yeah. And you'll notice I really push the trapezius muscle, and I tend to extend the width of the shoulders. And that's just personal taste. If you don't like that, you don't have to do that. In fact, I would hope you don't. I would hope you do what you like to do. But I think it's important to make sure your style affects everything equally. The way I was talking about Joe Mad, and the way he would, everything that he draws has his personal touch to it. And so it's like, okay, I really focused on how to draw a face, and I notice a lot of people will do this, where it's like how they draw faces is sort of their own way. They'll develop a style, but that has to carry on over to everything else, and sometimes people don't do that too much. And it was always interesting to me, although it still works, because like I look at manga, and I would look at manga where the faces are really pushed and huge eyes, and then the manga person, their body is more realistic but still kind of weird, but then like the vehicles would be perfectly realistic, like just they could belong in the real world. And I don't know, it worked, which was the strangest thing, because to me, I would feel like things need to be pushed more. And if you want a good example of something that does push it more, a film like Triplets of Belleville really does this, where everything gets exaggerated. And not just the style of the characters or the environment, it's not just that, it's the way the characters move gets pushed, the body language gets pushed. So I really like that movie, The Triplets of Belleville. It's a really cool movie, and if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. And yeah, so this pose was super hard, and this feels like the whole way through kind of feels like you're juggling way too many balls than you can handle, and some are bowling pins and some are torches that are on fire, and so it's just like, oh man, this is so hard. But the way you get better at it is by doing it, right? Like for me, I struggle, but I'm still struggling a lot less than I used to. And again, going back to the advice I always give is just, draw a lot. And this takes longer than you want it to take. For me, it took about, I don't know, maybe 15 years longer than I would have liked. I would have liked to be at this level when I was maybe 19, and I'm 30, so maybe 11 years, yeah. It's only 11 years longer than I anticipated. But yeah, I hope this helps, and I hope you draw and try out experimenting with your life drawings and making it more interesting. I mean, maybe you already are, in which case, kudos to you. But if you're not, and if you're getting kind of bored and tired of doing the same old thing, or you're feeling like you're getting into copy mode way too much, then try breaking free from that and doing your own characters and just looking at the pose and using it as a way of like answering questions that you might have, where it's like, well, I'm not really sure how to draw the arm in this position. Then you glance at the reference like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. And then you go back to almost drawing from imagination. So yeah, hope it helped, and thanks for watching.